But with, what are we, 2, 4, 6, 8, or 10?
But you can turn it off now.
Is Bernie outside?
He is.
That's all right, don't worry. God, I prepared an agenda that has an item for each one of you. Should we start? It's a couple minutes after 10. Let's just start the talk. I thought we'd start with the hot news this morning is the issue of searching Mar-a-Lago, which is, I think, of global importance. And my own view is if Mr. Trump still has Shaquille O'Neal's shoe, he's certainly entitled to a few mementos from his term in the White House. Is that a neoliberal position to take? Is there any other comment on either Shaquille O'Neal or our former president? The cacophony of everyone speaking at once. Georgia election interference. Is Lindsey Graham in trouble, or is that tired news?
It's ridiculous news.
Morning, Charlie.
Which side do you want?
Actually, it's a pretty ambidextrous group.
Is this conservative or radical?
I thought that too when I sat down.
Radical would be right at home here.
Don, can we get a mic over here?
No. I'd like to see a raise of hands who feels that the raid on the estate of our esteemed ex-president was justified and how many don't?
That's a good question. By show of hands, who thinks it was a justified, approved search? And who thinks it was a totally unjustifiable raid?
I don't know. I don't know either. I don't know, and we won't know until we get more facts. That's the issue.
Oh, what don't you know?
Well, all we're hearing is a lot, but nothing specific. I mean, what proof do we have, as an example? And of course, the thing is, I don't know whether it was an important thing. I mean, in other words,
Well, it had Donald Trump's golf scores.
Pardon me?
His golf scores were there. I mean, that's state secret.
Well, do we really know what the secrets are, though? See, that's my issue. I mean, there's all this innuendos about what was there and what wasn't there.
Well,
So, you know.
but that's not the question. The question is, should any of that stuff been there?
Should what?
Should any of that stuff been there?
We don't know.
What do you mean we don't know?
You don't know what was picked up, do you?
Yeah, they told you.
What?
They gave you a list of things, of the general categories of things they picked up. You don't believe them?
When did that come out?
I'm
The
sorry.
first day. They said.
Edith?
I wonder why we distrust the FBI and why we even question
So like an
why
ice cream
we
cone.
distrust the FBI and why we even question it. And I don't think there has been anything in the history that the FBI has done something that was illegal, for example, or was not appropriate either. So I'm wondering why suddenly we are questioning all of this when we before relied on it very heavily, for example.
I actually think that's a very good question, and I'm not as comfortable as you are saying they've never done anything wrong,
Right.
and therefore anything the FBI does we should just accept because it's the FBI.
Right.
I do think there was a time when our trust was that great And I wonder even then whether it should have been. I just don't know. How many of you feel like if just that it was the FBI is sufficient evidence that it should have been done?
What was the question?
Yeah, Edith is saying, and I understand the question, if the FBI did it, it must have been necessary and appropriate.
So the FBI can do no wrong.
No, I'm wondering, do we have an example in the history, for example, that the FBI was inappropriate?
I think back in the days of J. Edgar Hoover, there were a number of those kind of things happening.
Depending upon whether you're on what was the list that Hoover had?
Yeah.
Yeah, Tom?
Ken.
I've done
Well,
this so many
certainly
times.
times. Well, I think it's fair to say that regarding the Russian hoax at the FBI, there was testimony from different FBI representatives about what went on. And so how deep, it was not at the lower level, but at the higher level in D.C. So I wouldn't say the FBI had clean hands in the Trump-Russian hoax.
What? Why?
I got it.
Gene?
In this particular instance, it has been reported that files were marked top secret and extra special top secret. And if they were marked that way, then certainly they shouldn't be anywhere except in some very secure environment. And Trump's lawyer was given an inventory on the spot of everything they took. So if they are saying that they took things that they didn't take, Trump's lawyer has that inventory that proves that it was there.
And why would Trump's lawyer be quiet about that, I wonder?
Pardon me?
But if Trump's lawyer has an actual, honest, accurate list of what's there, and on that list are absolutely inappropriate things, why hasn't he come forward, the lawyer, and said, we have to...
That what they're reporting is untrue. He can't say that because he has that inventory, that he knows exactly what was taken and how it was marked.
Oh, and therefore he cannot say
Right.
it's totally correct.
Exactly.
I'm of a couple of minds here. Then we're going to go to Audrey first, and then my first or second mind.
I don't know if any of you have heard about the movement, Birds Aren't Real. Birds Aren't Real. A young man who lived around Washington started a movement, and he's selling T-shirts that say, birds aren't real. And what he has done was, he has said that we don't know what's going on in the United States. And he's starting this propaganda that all of the birds are actually drones that the government has put in the air to monitor our behavior. Now, he's making a fortune. I actually bought one of his T-shirts.
You're kidding?
Because we don't ever know. We don't know what happened to Marilyn Monroe or Princess Diana or any of that stuff. So are we ever going to know the truth? I'll keep my T-shirt.
I have two thoughts. The first is, I think we tend to overclassify. And I don't know whether that's because classified information just is more important, and therefore presidents who read classified documents are doing important things with their time, or because the classifiers have little else to do. That said, there are some things that clearly should be classified. And my operating assumption really is that some of the things in the boxes really shouldn't have been removed from the White House. There's also, I guess, a semi-requirement, although it doesn't fall into the category of state secret, that everything that's in the White House, when any president serves, is important for history and should be available to us. It can be totally innocuous, but it's part of the history of that presidential term, and therefore shouldn't be removed. I don't know. Yeah.
about the word that's going around that the reason this was done, the raid, was pretty much coming out of fear from the Democrats that Trump would run as president again.
Fear that he'd run as president again. Are you certain that this damages his chances of running for president or enhances them?
No, I'm not. Matter of fact, it may work the other way.
That's what I think.
Yeah, but just you think about the Democrats, are they feeling fear about the fact that Trump may run again and win again? And this is one way to make sure he doesn't, because I guess there's a law about someone who's been convicted of something.
I hear what you're saying, but I really think this inures to his benefit, not to his detriment, personally. Keeps him in the news, but I understand the point. And you're also implying that the FBI was democratic. They weren't just an agency of, as we all know, independent and unbiased enforcers of the law. Iva?
I think we're forgetting that there are other people other than the FBI. I mean, you have Merrick Garland, who has a reputation for being incredibly careful about things he does, and it took him a long time. I can't just, it's just not the FBI. And Trump, Mr. Trump, was given several opportunities to hand over this information. He didn't do it for whatever his reasons. I don't know. I don't really care. But he didn't do it. So there must be something in the super duper confidential area that he shouldn't have. Remember, he used to have conferences with world leaders like Putin and not want any note takers. Who knows what was going on in those meetings? You don't know what he was doing. Do you? I don't.
No.
No.
The one thing I would say, though, totally in support of what you're saying, we've had a lot worse heads of justice than Merrick Garland. I think he's a really outstanding Secretary of DOJ, Attorney General. Ken.
Thank you.
Ken.
Frankly, I hope they find something. I really do. Because I find myself constantly trying to defend Trump when I don't want to. I don't want to defend him anymore. I want any number of other Republicans to run in the primary and beat him. Period.
Which is I'm going to take that as a segue into the next two issues, and one of them is, well, first of all, what does woke mean?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Is somebody here? Can somebody just say what the short definition of woke is?
You want to ask DeSantis? He's using it all the
He
time.
does use it all the time. Well, the textbook definition of woke is sensitive to the role of race. Full stop. It doesn't mean that you're a screaming liberal or a screaming conservative. It just means you say, yeah, race played a role in our history. And I'm woke. It's just, it's not that, to me, not that an outlandish position to take. Does that make any sense?
Well, you don't want to
woke people, I think people that are promoting woke do not want this information taught to their children, right? They don't.
No.
So I appreciate that.
People opposed to woke say, let's not teach it in our schools, let's not talk about it.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not altogether sure they even know what they're saying. And I mean specifically DeSantis. Why is he opposed? I'm sure that he may say the grades K through 3 don't spend a lot of time talking about the gruesome nature of slavery. And I don't have a daughter in that fight. But I think he's perfectly accepted. I would think he would be perfectly agreeable with teaching high school kids and junior high school kids that our history includes slavery. And slavery is a racist thing, the way it was practiced here.
We all got taught that, Bob.
Yeah.
When we were kids going to
That's right.
school.
Thus, we were all woke.
It's nothing new.
We're all
No, I
woke.
know, but people are opposed to it now. They don't want this taught to their children. Parents are saying, we do not teach our children, because this will make them, give them certain,
It'll make black kids feel
yeah,
unimportant and white kids feel more important. And
it happened.
I mean, you're right,
You
totally
don't teach
right,
history.
but why then the issue? Because I think you're just spot on.
It's political.
Well, I don't know, it may be political, but I think it's also psychological. So, thing that's going through society that somehow we don't want to. We want to guide people's thinking. What's going on? It's just-
Well, you're probably right. You know, guiding people's thinking and doing it at an age when they don't know the other side, the differences and so on. The question is, how acceptable is it to students and, as we find out, students' parents?
But to me, and I don't know that this is going on at all, but if somebody is in our classrooms teaching the other side of slavery and racism, I want to know what the hell they're talking about. Because I don't think there's another side.
I've never heard of another side.
They don't teach another side, they just don't teach it. It didn't happen. They ignore it. That's the better term.
I think that's probably
Or
why.
why.
What I'd like to do now is just briefly talk about, it doesn't have to be that brief, core Republican policies and core Democratic policies. What are they, when you think Republican, what does that mean other than just a party label? Is it lower taxes, smaller government,
Strong military. Strong military.
strong military, stronger international policy, perhaps?
No new debt.
Opposition to debt, which is linked to smaller government, no new spending, which would theoretically require. What about social issues like gay marriage, guns? Is that more or less Republican, or are those in a separate category?
Republicans are opposed to that.
Yeah, I think it's almost become Republican to be on social issues conservative. Democratic policies then, other than just saying the opposite. Certainly, at least the way I view it, as an admitted, confessed Democrat, more concerned about solving the problems of the country, which requires, or using the government to solve some of the problems, which requires a bigger government and higher taxes to pay for it. John?
In fact, you couldn't pick out a more perfect example of republicanism than Liz Cheney. I mean, you take away her Trumpism, her Trump antagonisms, she is a near perfect Republican.
Of the traditional sort. I think she's an absolutely superb person, and I hate to admit it, but I'd probably vote for her in any election. I just think she's that good. But her policies, you're right, 90% of the time are just right down the Republican line. Would it be fair to say she's a Northeastern Republican in that tradition of what Republicanism was?
She got demolished.
And that my point being, the Northeastern Republican that had views that were, to me, logical and sensible, are not necessarily Wyoming Republican values. Candidates in 2024. First, the Republicans. Who do we think are going to be the candidates?
Well, I hope this is the primary now we're talking about. I hope.
Well, I'm saying 2024. And so, yeah, so yes.
Primary first.
Primary candidates.
Yeah, well, I hope Nikki Haley, I hope DeSantis, I hope the governor of Virginia.
Youngkin?
I hope Pence. I hope they all run in the primary. And I wouldn't care if Liz Cheney ran. I don't know what she'd run as. She might be a deal breaker or something. You know, I'm hoping for a broken convention where no one gets enough votes, and then I want Trump to lose. Okay? Did I make myself clear?
Yeah.
So,
No, I think
but
you
I'll
would
tell you,
too.
but I've already said. Then it comes down to who the Democrat is. And by the way, when you ask what are the Democratic core values, you got to distinguish Democrat from progressive.
Ken, what's your problem with Trump? You keep mentioning it.
Well, January 6th has something to do with it, but it's his personality and his character just overwhelmed now the good things he did. And look, I think if Trump at least was given a chance by the Democratic Party to have a honeymoon period, and they were at him right while he was running. The whole thing of the Russian hoax. 3 years of the Mueller report. Is anyone going to dispute me on that? I don't know. But no, Trump did well, and it's too bad the COVID thing came along. He might have been shielded to win. But his character and what came out with January 6th.
What's more important to you? What he does or what he is? In your opinion.
Look, it always comes down to a choice. Tell me who the other candidate will be, and I'll answer that question.
Well, you said no way you're going to
Oh, I
go
didn't
to
say
Trump.
that. Oh, no, I didn't say that. I don't want him to win the primary.
Okay.
But if he does, there's going to be a candidate, an opposition. Who's going to run for the progressive Democrats?
Let's go to Don, and I want to come back to Ken and ask you to answer your own question of liberal versus progressive.
No, why should I answer it?
Because I asked you.
That's for you to answer.
Getting back to Charlie's question, to me, the most important thing is the person. And if you go back and read a little of the history of Germany in the early 1930s, and you follow Adolf Hitler's career and you follow Donald Trump's career, and they're very parallel, very, very much parallel.
Very much one.
Parallel.
Oh, I'd love to see you elucidate on that one.
Oh, when Hitler took over, Germany was in the pits. They were really in a terrible depression, and he pulled them out of it, almost single-handedly, by getting their industries going again. Much of which was building airplanes, and military. But still, he did that. But in the process, he got rid of everybody who was not a yes man. He got his Himmler and Goebbels and Goering and what have you gang in there, and then he changed. His personality changed. But his personality didn't change because his personality was always to take over and take over and take over. And he kept that up. And when he, for example, he was accused of, and I don't know if they ever proved it, but he was accused of burning down the Reichstag. Well, our friend Mr. Trump sends his crowd up to the
So you're comparing President Trump to Hitler.
Oh, yes.
And
Very
you-
definitely.
And you see they're very definite. The
Their
same
careers are quite the same, and they're based on their personalities. And I think they're very, very close indeed. And you know, when the war was over and Germany lost, there were still tens of thousands of Germans who thought Hitler was the greatest thing.
I don't think we're right. I don't think we deny that.
Okay.
What has Trump done that has shown you that he is similar to Hitler?
Sure.
Specifically.
His whole career is taking over, being a one-man show.
Very successful at it.
That's not the point.
What's wrong with it?
What is it?
Well, if you're going to have a one-man show, then you don't need everybody else in there. And the guy, we're having this situation going on in Europe, in Poland and Hungary and Turkey and Brazil. They're still democracies, but they're autocratic democracies.
Yeah, I
They're
can
not
understand
representative
that.
democracies.
But you really don't know Mr. Trump, do you? About his personality and his character. You don't know, do you?
I know, but I've heard from people who do know him, who wouldn't go near it in the business world before he got into this, who wouldn't go near a deal that he was involved with. Don't go, Joe Gibbs.
We have to share the mic with Ken, who's behind you, who will just say, I second everything that Don said.
Sorry, Don, I can't do it. You know, here I go again, I have to defend Trump. I don't want to, but he was no Hitler. He's no Hitler. He was a businessman up until he ran for president. I mean, Hitler's career was all in politics and military. So there's no comparison. I mean, maybe what happened afterwards, maybe you can, the January 6th thing, I don't know if you want to make that kind of a comparison, but not beforehand. My God.
Charlie?
I don't think, I mean, although we have a southern border, I don't think he wants to get rid of Jews or Spanish or whatever people. That's what Hitler did.
Well, and Trump was doing the same thing with Hispanics.
No, I don't
His attitude was the Hispanics, we got to build a wall, we got all this problem. Well, but the pattern is there. If you read one and then you read the other, it's a pattern.
I said this before, maybe I did. He was my landlord in New York City. I had the opportunity to meet him at board meetings. He was looking out for the tenants. He did not act in any way that you would say he's a one-man show. He was interested in what we were doing, how we could improve the building. So my personal experience has been very positive.
Bertie?
I worked in New York with a law firm for 38 years and was quite familiar with Mr. Trump. In fact, the office was right down the street. And his reputation was none too good for many of the characteristics that he's shown for his presidency. He was totally untrustworthy if you were a businessman dealing with him. There used to be a store on, I think it was 5th Avenue, Vinewood Tellers, that he took over and was rehabbing, and he brought in some Italian marble workers to do facial work on there, and they and a lot of other people never got paid. There was always a big fight going on. That's remained true. A lot of his lawyers haven't been paid. It's one of the reasons why he's having trouble getting a lawyer now, because they're not sure that they get paid for the work they would have to do. He was generally seen, I don't know which building that you're talking about, but he and his father were very racial-minded and racial, anti-black. And they had some buildings where the activities that they were engaged in were investigated by the federal government, and they were called to task for it. He was often on Imus in the Morning Show in New York, which Imus was not the nicest guy on radio, very anti-feminine, and Trump would be on that show a lot, and a lot of others, where he would call in not as Donald Trump, but as Donald Trump's PR person, and speak about Donald Trump. I didn't meet him in an intimate setting like at a board meeting or something, but I did meet him on a number of occasions. I was very active with the pro bono community I ran our firm's program, and he would show up from time to time at those. I'm not aware of his ever contributing to anybody, but it was a PR opportunity. When I was very much opposed to, I didn't think that he would ever end up actually being a candidate, but he had talked about it for quite some time. Another incident which was quite famous for him was there were 5 black kids who were accused of raping a woman in Central Park. And he not only condemned them and said that they were, the epitome of what blacks are like, he actually ran a full-page article and advertisement in the New York Times that they should get the death sentence. And as time went on, they were pretty much exonerated from all of that. There was actually no proof of their all being engaged in that particular situation. And that is his modus operandi. And his activity is to stonewall, which he's been very successful at. He was that way in New York, but in the business community and within the intelligentsia, not the intelligentsia, but the higher social classes in New York, they wanted nothing to do with him. And as far as his character is concerned, I think there were a lot of Republican leaders who, after 9/11, spoke their minds and really said what they thought about him at that time. But it goes back to the question you posed: is it his character or is it his policies? And I think that it's a big issue, and you've got, so many of them, McCarthy and a whole bunch of them, who came out and said exactly what: I can't take this man anymore. Lindsey Graham, this guy is over the hill. And then they have this conversion, which is very hard to understand, other than, well, I like his policies. But as
We have to
individual
time.
okay.
Are you going to rebut that or not?
I can answer it if there are other people here that may want to speak up.
Let me just ask a question so we can move on. How many here think Trump will likely run again and get the nomination? Really?
Run again.
Run again, but not get the
Run again, yeah.
And get the nomination?
No.
Yeah. I tend to believe that we're beating a dead horse. We are. I think you're right. He probably will run again. I'd be very surprised if he got the nomination, and I'd be extremely surprised if he got the nomination if he won, except against some of the candidates we could talk about, AOC. Don? And that, by the way, being a preface to say, let's move on to something else besides just Trump.
Well, as far as Trump goes, how are we ever going to evaluate his good deeds? And there have been a few, his bad deeds, and it's just his personality. We need somebody that is representative of both. We want deeds, and we want something that we can look up to as a president, and we have not had that. And I'll repeat, I'm a registered Republican, have been all my life until the last two national elections. It's a shame that we've let it get this far. Why don't we change the subject?
Well, let me use that as a lead-in to another question, which I hadn't anticipated. Biden's been in office now for 3 years, 2 years almost. How would we grade him at this stage in his presidency? Deeds and character. Well, apparently not with enthusiasm.
Come on, guys, let's hear it.
Audrey?
I don't think he's had enough support for us to grade him. He's kind of like a lone wolf. And to get more support in, the government, we could evaluate him. But right now, it's like he's swimming upstream.
How many presidents have achieved legislative success like he's achieved in their first year in office?
I agree that he has done amazing for, the cooperation that he's got.
And for his popularity, right? Is he polling in the 20s, something like that?
Right.
And yet, boom, 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 we've got 3 rather significant bills. The last one being a bill I would think, most people would think would never get passed. So maybe he's only a relatively unpopular president, but something's happening. Don, no, I go first and then Don.
I just happen to think that President Biden has been sabotaged by his own party in so many ways. I mean, I think he's wanted to do so many more good things, and it's his own party that is standing in his way. And as far as his character, I think his character is certainly better than President Trump, but he's accomplished a lot lately, but because they're maybe getting in line.
But I think, I would have said not long ago, his party, the Democratic Party, is the stumbling block, but that's because of West Virginia and Arizona senators. But both, with relatively minor changes in legislation, voted for the winning not Build Back Better, but what do we call it, Inflation Adjustment Act, which included almost everything that Build Back Better had. I mean, I just think it's extraordinary, the success level this unpopular Nebish has had. And I gotta tell you, I find him to be, sadly, I mean, I happen to like him, but I just think he's very Nebishy. He's
Where
Nebishy.
did you learn that word, nebbish?
Nebishy. Charlie told me.
I like that word.
I see that there's no youngsters in the audience here, so
Speak for yourself.
are any of you
Turn it to your face.
problems that we've had with elections up until this year or last year, until the 16? We never questioned the election. There was that chance in Florida here, but now to be a representative with Trump's background, you have to say it was a stolen election. Do any of us, even Republicans, believe that that was really a stolen election?
And related to that, what's this Mastriano, or however you say his name, what's he going to do if he's elected? I mean, he's very clearly an election denier, and was he going to try to change the way we count the votes? Or the way
So many of the candidates today are going back to that. He didn't lose, he won.
What other Republican
I'm going to admit
candidates?
something. I'm very paranoid about Hillary Clinton, okay? But I think there's a lot of people who are more paranoid about Donald Trump than I am about Hillary Clinton. And it comes out constantly. It's never ending about Trump. Even when we know he did the big lie. We talked about it. I've written about it, I think, in Legacy. I talked about it. And yet we keep coming back, Trump, 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 Trump.
Yeah.
Let's get off it.
But then
Trump
I'll go right back to
doesn't want
it.
you to do that.
Well,
I go right back to why in the world? What happened to Hillary Clinton? Why was she the face of evil for
we
so
don't
many
have
people?
enough time today. Let me prepare and I'll tell you.
But and I'll just say a little bit more. She was considered quite a successful senator. She was considered quite a successful Secretary of State. And all of a sudden, she's a dog face. I just signed up yesterday for the Clinton Global Initiative again this fall, which I've attended several times now. And yes, that means that I haven't spent as much time with the Clintons as Charlie has with Donald Trump. But I know them and respect them a lot. And I just don't, I'm not saying that I vote for her, I'm not saying that I think she ought to be president, but I just don't understand the animosity.
Listen, I'm not going to be so honest in this meeting anymore. You know, because I don't want.
No, I'll bet
I'll gladly talk to you privately about what I think about Hillary Clinton. And I'll even do it in Legacy.
But I suspect most Republicans here would share your view. Quite anti-Hillary. Is that not true? Are there any Republicans here besides Charlie? Besides
Democrats here would say support. Let's get that way. I want to change the subject, in other words.
Please.
from
You have a second, because I've got more.
I'm finished.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
You know, I think Hillary Clinton is a very smart lady. And I think she would have been a better president than what we got, Trump. All the things that we have even touched on here about Trump, how can you believe him? How can you trust him? He's morally, as far as I'm concerned, is at the lower end of morality. And I don't know, we have the crazy people that love him, like the Pride Boys and a few other cults that really love him. I would even identify with the Pride Boys.
Republican candidates in 24, I looked at 2 or 3 different lists this morning, and if I'll just go through them and you can react. Trump, again, could easily, I think, if he sought the nomination, there's a chance he could win it. DeSantis is probably the largest opposition, and DeSantis is yesterday in Michigan or somewhere, or today even. In other words, he's spreading his influence around important states for the Republican nomination. Pence, he also was front page of the New York Times today in his effort to woo different state delegations. Nikki Haley, I think somebody else mentioned her already. Yeah. Tim Scott, one of the handful, if not only black Republican senators. Ted Cruz, I don't see him as that nice. Trump Jr. is on the list, which surprised me. I do think he has political ambitions, but I'm surprised to see him on the list. And then Governor Sununu. Not overwhelmingly surprised at that. The Democrats start with Biden, likely to run again. Kamala, if Biden doesn't. How many of you here, as quasi-Democrats or willing to admit that you've occasionally voted for Democrats, would support Kamala? I share your view. Pete Buttigieg, interesting choice. Is the country ready for a gay president? Is it going to happen?
We're not ready.
Amy Klobuchar,
Yes.
are you ready for a book throwing? Or what? A book thrower. Didn't she throw a book at one of her? Elizabeth Warren. Oh, not going to happen.
He's a relic.
Bernie Sanders, less likely. Gavin Newsom. His hair is absolutely in place, and I think he has his suits made. Gretchen Whitmer. Wouldn't have thought about that. Roy Cooper. He's North Carolina governor. Who is Roy Cooper? In this audience, then, not likely. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
What a great representative.
Now, here's my guy, J.B. Pritzker. He's the governor of Michigan. Illinois, I'm sorry. Got a lot of money. I think he's done a good job in Illinois. I don't know what, I haven't spent a lot of time studying that. But I think of that whole list, he has the least things that I can think of that are negatives. And on the Republican side, I kind of think Nikki Haley has a real chance. I don't know how the Republicans here feel about that. First of all, do you like those lists? Do you think that there's some names missing? And on those lists, would some of you be willing to share? Ivan?
What about Larry Hogan from Maryland? Do you Republicans like Larry Hogan at all? I think he's a moderate, sensible.
I think he's a great guy. I don't know that he'd win the Republican nomination, but he's certainly a strong Republican governor. I think he will bring very likely a Republican in behind him in Michigan. He's got that much strength. Any other comments on these two lists? Any preferences? Anybody we've left out? Pelosi. Yeah.
Very ambitious.
She's 80,
Yeah, she's over.
80 or something. I mean, if there's a definition for over the hill that's not included in this room, it's Nancy. And I think she's fabulous, by the way. as I do everyone here. Core democratic policies, bigger government doing more, and thus costing more. Why do democratic policies tend to be opposed to the free market system, or are they? Don is saying he doesn't think they are, neither do I. I think, I personally think that a totally free market system needs to have some corrections and adjustments because it can leave people out. And I think that we need to support free market but regulate it. That's how I feel. What about globalism versus isolationism? Does that break on political party basis?
It used to. You've got to be global. In this day and age, you've got to think globally. You can't.
But both Dons are saying, in one case, it used to be something that was by both parties, and Don Mealy is saying it's something must exist. I completely agree, but I'm not so sure that it is the dominant position among Republicans today. I don't know. Am I wrong in that?
I don't know. I'm sorry.
Thought you had a great response.
Well, let me think about it.
I saw somebody, I know who it was Hageman, is that how you say her name? The Republican nominee for governor to replace Liz Cheney, who in one short quip said, I mean, she's a globalist, as though that was as serious a swear word as she could come up with.
Speaking of Liz Cheney, I was amazed at what happened. I'd be curious to know how other people felt about her being not losing, but really swamped. I'm curious. Anybody?
Interesting.
Yeah. I was as surprised as you. I thought she'd lose, but I thought it'd be a close loss.
Does it tell us anything?
Yeah.
Don't spend a lot of time on television knocking a Republican president.
It tells you that politicians are such that the party line, there's very few profiles and coverage. And you might say that she tended that way. I don't know, maybe she does. And therefore they lose. The party runs the show. And they're politicians. We're not thinking, it's wrong, it's hard for us in this room to think, to talk about this. They don't even fight with each other as much as we fight with each other.
They don't talk to each other. How can they fight? Well, that's it.
If I have offended Jeannie to the extent she has to leave, I'm very sorry.
Got a bridge gate.
The truth. What else is going on in current events?
Can I?
Please.
You got to move faster than that, Charlie.
We talked about the old show.
It's interesting, I think, that with everything else happening, there's a couple things we don't, if you watch the mainstream media as an example, and I switch back and forth between them. What about immigration? I mean, it's getting worse and worse in terms of our borders. Now, basically Fox is the one that covers it all the time, but when you go to the other, essentially, I assume that it's as bad as they say it is, but nobody seems to be concerned about it, except when you do look at the polls, people are concerned about that to some degree, and maybe that's when we talk about Biden's popularity on doing, and of course, he's the guy that's getting blamed for doing nothing about letting these hundreds of thousands of people come into the United States. And it's a point that why would the mainstream media cover it more, and that's just one focus.
You know, I think immigration is a very, very interesting topic. Are there hundreds of thousands of immigrants crossing the river, or how are they coming across those hundreds of thousands?
Well, there's some, they have to swim, I guess most of it.
Swim or wade, yeah. As I understand it, that's just not the case for friends of mine who live in Texas. Aubrey?
From what I've read, most of the people get here legally. They, get work permits or whatever, and then they just stay. But more come legally than illegally.
By far, I think it's something like 50-some percentage of the illegal immigrants in this country are visa overstays. But my big issue is the painter left the room. But what would we do for painters and carpenters if we really stopped immigration or forced it to be a process that requires months to go through and money to spend? Don?
Well, this is not just a United States problem. It's all over the world, particularly in Europe and the Middle East. They're having all this same problem of this masses of people trying to find a better world.
I think those words are hugely important, seem to me. What's wrong with trying to find a better place to be, a better world?
That's how our ancestors got here. They were looking for something better.
Not a lot of American Indians in this room.
No.
That said, there's a difference between legal and illegal. And if the legal process, and Don, this may speak really what you're saying, Bill, if the legal process is so cumbersome or expensive that the only way to get in here to take the jobs that they need is to wade or swim. But again, my friends in Texas, and we lived in Texas, before coming here, say this idea of hundreds of thousands of people crossing the Rio Grande just isn't happening.
You're saying that the number is wrong?
That number is wrong. The number of immigrants who come and just drive across at the illegal points of entry is huge. But they're not necessarily, they're not citizens. They may not be green card holders, but they're work permit holders. Now, I could be dead wrong on that.
Oh, managed before under that system.
I'm sorry?
I said the system of illegal immigration has worked in the past.
It was taking them 2 or 3 years to process some of these.
That's because maybe that's because of the number.
Well, it is.
Particularly visa overstays. They just don't show up again as they're meant to show up. But I'd like to really study that, maybe make that a topic that we talk about again in another meeting where we spend more time on it, and do some real research into how many cross how, from where into where, and for what purpose. Because I think this notion of thousands lined up along the border trying on their spandex, I don't think so, Ken?
If you're going to do another study of a report, I'll wait on that.
But I welcome some help on that. I don't want to be a sole source of data on that. Maybe we can. But is that a topic that the rest of you would like to see us dig deeper on?
Yes.
Good.
By the way, the wall still exists. The walls that have been built.
What, 400 feet or something? I don't know.
What has been built has not been torn down.
I think you're right, but I don't know how much has been built and where it is. But again, I'm certain they're not crossing in the mountainous areas to the west. I don't know. We'll dig into that more.
Yeah, obviously it's been a long-standing problem that the Congress has not addressed. But just recently, the mayor of New York City and the mayor of DC are now getting in busloads. You know, the governor of Texas is sending busloads to those two locations to spread out, to show them what the problem is of the escalation of immigration. It's a lot of it is, as what was said, is asylum seekers, which is legal. You know, but it's been reported. You know, when Bill Tickle refers to Fox, it's not the commentators that are on Fox. It's the border agents that they're interviewing. It's the local mayors that they interview. And this is
How many busloads have gone into D.C. and New York, do you know?
enough for the two of them to complain to that they wanted some help from the government. And then they're only this small number.
They caved pretty quickly.
I'd just like to see what that number is. I would think New York City could handle an influx of a large group of people without noticing it.
You're right. Well, Adams is complaining about it.
Yeah.
My God, he says we're overflowing. And there's only been a dozen buses.
On the list of things to research, I'm curious to know how many are going in, where they're staying, how do they find housing, and how do they find work?
I guess we'd have to study. But the thing is, in addition to the asylum seekers and others, there's so-called getaways or gotaways, or numbers in the 500, up to several 100,000 gotaways.
Well, and I think included in that number are people who don't come back. That we can't deal with their asylum application as they come across. They're supposed to come back and process. They just never come back.
I don't know. And simultaneous with that,
we'll make that a major.
and what should be included in it is the fact that the drug cartels are taking advantage of this whole situation of the open border. And the fentanyl, the death rates, deaths from fentanyl of young adults has exploded.
And we'll add that. I mean, for example, my understanding of fentanyl is that it's both that came from China. If it took a circuitous route and was sent to Mexico, because I thought you could mail quite easily from China. I don't know. But we'll add it to the research. Joan, the only fentanyl user here.
Haven't we, for years used Mexican immigrants to do labor that Americans wouldn't do, such as picking in the fields in California?
And then you can just go back a little bit further and say that the right color of Americans would do. I mean, bottom line is, white people don't like to pick cotton and don't like to pick melons. And so they fended off the blacks who were immigrants, Mexicans. And that's a fact. And going further than that, try operating an agricultural business in Texas without Mexican labor. So tough. I don't think it can happen.
If I may, notwithstanding anything I said today, I hope you all come to my play on September 22nd.
I definitely will. I have a bias, a reason to do so. Thank you all. It's 11 o'clock. And next week, we'll do immigration. Okay? So pick your study tools and learn